Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at something new that popped up. It's the launch of the Grayscale Bitcoin Adopters ETF. Ticker is BCOR.
Exactly. And think of this as, your quick way to get up to speed on what this ETF is really about and maybe why it's relevant for you. We're basing this on the official press release from Grayscale Investments.
Right. So Grayscale Investments, they bill themselves as the world's largest crypto-native asset manager. They launched this Grayscale Bitcoin Adopters ETF, BCOR, on April 30th, 2025. Okay, so the name Bitcoin Adopters gives us a clue, but let's get specific. What exactly is this thing investing in?
So BCOR is set up to invest in companies, specifically companies that have adopted Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. It's important, though it doesn't hold Bitcoin itself directly anyway. Instead, it follows an index, the Index Bitcoin Adopters Index.
The Index Bitcoin Adopters Index. Okay, that sounds like where the secret sauce is. What is that?
Well, it's a proprietary index, meaning index created themselves. Its whole purpose is to measure how well companies are doing if they've decided to hold Bitcoin as part of their, corporate treasury management. Grayscale calls these the Bitcoin adopters. So yeah, it's pretty targeted.
Targeted is right. So it's not just any company dabbling in crypto. We're talking about companies specifically putting Bitcoin onto their balance sheet, as a reserve. That sounds like, well, a serious commitment.
Oh, absolutely. And the launch itself, Grayscale says it reflects a rising trend of corporate Bitcoin treasury adoption. They don't just see it as novel. They call it increasingly compelling. It suggests this shift, where some companies are starting to view Bitcoin as maybe more than just speculation, like a real piece of their financial strategy.
Okay, but why? Why would a company actually put Bitcoin in its treasury? What's the thinking there?
The announcement mentions a couple of main ideas. One is using Bitcoin as a potential hedge against inflation. The argument being, its limited supply might help it hold value if traditional currencies lose ground. And the second reason is simply diversification for their treasury, adding a different kind of asset alongside their cash or bonds.
So BCOR is kind of a bet on that trend continuing, a way to invest in the idea that more companies will adopt Bitcoin for their treasuries. When we say Bitcoin adopters, what kind of companies are we talking about? Is it just tech firms or?
No, they're aiming broader. The goal for BCOR is diversified global equity exposure. It apparently includes companies across 7 sectors and 15 different industries.
Yeah.
The thing linking them all together is that Bitcoin adoption for treasury purposes. So it gives you exposure to this trend through various types of businesses.
Okay, that's important. So if you're interested in this corporate adoption story, but maybe you don't want to buy Bitcoin directly yourself, this is an alternative route through stocks. But let's hammer this point home. What does BCOR not do?
Right, good point. The fund is very clear. It will not invest directly in digital assets like Bitcoin, and it won't use derivatives like futures or options to get exposure to crypto prices either. Also, no investments in initial coin offerings, ICOs. That's explicitly out.
So wait, even with Bitcoin in the name, the ETF's price isn't going to directly follow Bitcoin's price swings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's holding the stocks of the companies that hold Bitcoin. Its performance is tied to how those company stocks do overall. And, well, stocks are affected by tons of things beyond just the price of Bitcoin, right? Market sentiment, earnings, competition.
Okay. But the press release did mention something about potential indirect exposure. What do they mean by that?
Yeah. So the fund could end up having some indirect exposure. This might happen if it invests in companies that, say, use digital assets heavily in their actual business operations, or maybe companies that hold digital assets as like proprietary investments on the side, even if they aren't strictly treasury adopters by the index's definition.
Okay, so the main focus is treasury adoption, but there could be some incidental exposure to the wider crypto ecosystem through the companies it holds. Now, what about Grayscale's angle here? Why launch this now? What's their take?
Well, David Laval, he's their global head of ETFs, basically said BCOR lets investors tap into this corporate Bitcoin adoption theme without actually having to buy Bitcoin. He called it a forward-looking strategy, capturing the momentum, as he put it, of companies putting Bitcoin onto their balance sheets. You definitely get the sense Grayscale believes Bitcoin has a significant long-term future.
Makes sense from their perspective. And the index provider, IndexX, we know they created the index, but anything else we should know about how it works? Like, how do they decide who counts as a Bitcoin adopter?
So it's designed by IndexX, yes. It includes stocks from the U.S. and other countries. And these are specifically the companies Index classifies, using their own methodology, as having adopted Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. The press release doesn't spell out the exact criteria, but you'd assume it involves looking at public filings, company statements about their Bitcoin holdings, and their declared treasury policies.
Okay. Now, for anyone listening who's thinking, this sounds interesting, what are the standard but important warnings?
Yeah, the usual suspects, but always crucial. Investing involves risk. You could lose your principal investment. That's always true. And investors really need to sit down and think about their own goals, how much risk they're comfortable with, and look at the specific fees and expenses for this ETF before jumping in.
And to do that homework, where do they find the nitty-gritty details?
They need to get the prospectus or the summary prospectus for the Grayscale Bitcoin Adopters ETF. That's the key document. The release says you can request it by calling a number, 866-775-0313, or just visiting their website, etfs.grayscale.com/YOCOR. Good practical info. And finally, just a bit on Grayscale themselves. They've been around the crypto block, haven't they?
Oh, yeah. Definitely not new players. Grayscale started back in 2013, so they have, as they say, a decade-long track record in crypto investing. Their advisory arm, Grayscale Advisors, LLC, has been an SEC-registered investment advisor since early 2022, and they offer quite a range of products, single crypto assets, diversified baskets, thematic stuff related to the digital economy. So this BCOR fits into that broader offering.
Okay, so let's try and wrap up this deep dive on BCOR. Basically, it's a new ETF that lets you invest in the stocks of companies that are holding Bitcoin in their corporate treasury. It's a way to get exposure to that trend using a diversified global stock fund without buying Bitcoin directly. Is that about right?
That sums it up nicely, yeah. It's participation in that specific narrative, Bitcoin becoming part of the corporate financial landscape, but avoiding the direct volatility and, frankly, the hassle for some of holding Bitcoin itself. And, that does leave us with a pretty big question to ponder. If more and more corporations do start seeing Bitcoin as a legitimate treasury asset, what could that mean down the road for traditional finance, for the markets overall? It's certainly food for thought.
It really is. And look, if you want to dig deeper into this specific ETF, the Grayscale Bitcoin Adopters ETF, BCOR, remember that website, etfs.grayscale.com/deeper. You can find the prospectus there. As always, do your own research before making any investment decisions.